Um, Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year from the goddesses of the Round Table. I'd like to welcome you to our first discussion of 2021 on how to get over your ex, a very poignant topic. But firstly, let me just introduce you to our sisters that are here, our goddesses. Judy, say hi to the audience.
Hi everybody and Happy New Year.
Jackie.
Hi everyone, Happy New Year.
Gail.
Happy New Year, everyone.
And June.
Happy New Year.
Yay. Lovely, welcome. Unfortunately, Hayley and Teresa are not with us today, but that's fine because there's 5 of us. And as I said, today's discussion is on how to get over your ex. And we know that at this time of the year, a lot of people end their relationships either just before Christmas or just before New Year's. It's that time of year when people realize that actually this relationship isn't working for me, and they decide to go into the next year without their partner. So some people now will be nursing maybe a broken heart, or some people will be jumping for joy because they have realized that this relationship wasn't working for them. So in this discussion, we're going to look at how do you get over your ex and what are the healthy things that you need to do and can do for yourself on the next phase of your journey. And I will kick off with saying that if you're the one that broke off the relationship, it can be a time of celebration. And when, it may have been a long-term relationship, it may have been a marriage even, or it may have been a short-term relationship. But if you broke off the relationship, you may be feeling quite joyful, but also quite apprehensive as to how do you now carry on as a single person. And then on the other side is if you were the one that was dumped, how do you feel? You may be the one that's having to nurse a broken heart. You may be feeling resentful. You may be feeling angry. You may even be in denial that the relationship is over. So these are the sort of things that we're going to be discussing tonight on Goddesses of the Round Table. So who would like to kick off?
I don't mind.
I just want to, can I just add something to your list actually?
Yes.
Before we get into the conversation.
Yes.
I think all of those things are really relevant, but I think adding lockdown on top of that.
Oh, yes.
People might have been broken up when they're in lockdown. They might have kids and they've split up with their partner when they're in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I think, I think just to be, for me, I'm just mindful that that's an important part of the conversation.
Yes.
Because like, how then do you manage all of that when you're in lockdown with somebody that you just broken up,
And even the kids section as well. You may have children together as well. How do you manage that? That's a very important point. So yes, thank you, June.
I was just going to say, as somebody who notoriously every January starts to feel a little bit despondent and a little bit reflective. I don't know, it just seems to be my time. It's just part of my cycle and has been for as long as I can remember, that January is the time when I start to literally throw all my toys out around because, it's just got to be different this year, this is the year that, whatever. And when I was married, I remember my ex-husband used to say to me after Christmas, after New Year, he always used to say to me, I just know the next few weeks are going to be tough.
He's going to crawl in the doghouse himself and slide down in the doghouse.
Exactly, put himself in there. And because it's my pattern. So I've come to realise that, recognise that and embrace that is just part of who I am. So I try to avoid making any decisions about my relationship at this time, because also, as we know, it's also the busiest time for divorce lawyers, you know. And can you imagine, as June says, putting lockdown on top of that as well? So now, I mean, my ex-husband and I have been divorced and apart for quite some time now, over 10 years. But with my new partner, well, he's not new, but with my partner now, because I was so aware of it in my marriage, I don't talk about relationship stuff now in January. I avoid it, even if it comes up. I'm like, yeah, well, let's just leave that a bit. You know, we'll let's just get over the whole festive thing, and we'll talk about it. Because I just know I don't make great decisions around relationships in January. Does anyone else feel like that? Or does anyone else even recognize when they have a pattern?
I don't so much have a pattern. But yeah, I would say my pattern is probably just to go into a load of shame, actually. Like, oh my God, I did this and I haven't done that. You know, I would always kind of internalize what I haven't done as opposed to what's been good. You know, I mean, it's been a little while, so I've actually been single for quite a while, actually. And I can actually use January to kind of shame myself, especially when you've got Valentine's Day creeping up as well, you know,
Yeah.
February. So it's like, oh, I've got no one to kiss on New Year's Eve. And then February's kind of around the corner going, oh, you're still single. You know, so I can shame myself with all of that. But at the same time, you know, it's important to recognize, actually, I've done a huge load of trauma work on myself this year as well. So it's about recognizing that, you know, that is a pattern, like you said, but to when you become so aware of it, then that's when it becomes about change. Last thing I'll share as well, actually, there was a horrendous story that I'll share, just kind of trying to get over an ex when you're in a I wasn't in lockdown, obviously, because it was quite a number of years ago, but I was in a difficult situation because I broke up with a partner in the November, but the contract for my rent was tied in until July. So I had to stay with this person over the Christmas period and the New Year and all the rest of it. And oh my God, it was so painful. But I'm one of these people, like, when I've made a decision that it's done, it's done. I don't care how much you try and sweet talk me. I don't care how sorry you are. I'm not interested. So I literally just put those boundaries in. I moved into a different part of the, you know, I'll say, well, you stay up that room. I'm in this one. That's basically what I did. And I just waited until because, you know, I couldn't afford at the time to have the two different rent. That's what I did. So anyone that's experiencing that in lockdown, that you know, having those boundaries in place and making that decision, like, don't bust a grind on them.
Do you know what? But it's true, because on the post on Instagram, a man actually messaged me when he saw my story on, you know, about staying in lockdown even with your ex and still living in the same house.
Right.
And a man actually said, well, and sleep with them. And I said, well, that's not healthy, is it?
No.
And we will be discussing that in the discussion. So, because I think it's really important, if you are stuck in a home with your ex because of financial reasons, and pretty much that's the reason why people do tend to sort of stay in the same home, because of financial reasons, you've got to be very boundaried. You have to put in those boundaries in place, because if you're still sleeping with that person, they're not your ex, are they?
No.
You know,
and you're not broken up.
You're not broken up. No, absolutely. And I think this is where some people really blur the lines and they get confused and they cause confusion, especially if you've got children. It's not good for the child or the children to see that, because they're confusing the child. So one thing I would definitely say, if you're broken up, you've broken up. Do not keep going back into that sexual relationship with the person, because it just causes confusion for yourself, heartache. it's not
Yeah.
it's just not a healthy it's not healthy. It's not
Because
healthy.
emotionally, that's just revisiting the same old stuff again and again. You're not allowing or giving yourself any time to even think about healing, much less actually healing. It's still in the same old stuff.
Absolutely.
It makes it more harder to leave.
Amongst the pigeons. So firstly, when you're with your partner, look at the housing aspect. Do you have a joint tenancy? Because lots of people stay in that situation and they think because they're in lockdown, there's nothing else that can be done. Kick them out if you're not in a joint tenancy. Do not sit in it and experience DV and experience more trauma to yourself. If you are the woman and you have the children, ask him to leave. And if he doesn't leave, get the police to remove him. I know it's extreme, but to be honest, if you're like June and you've made your decision and you're there with the kids, and whether it's lockdown or not, go and seek support from someone and get advice. But if you've got a joint tenancy, then yes, you're stuck. But if that tenancy is in your name and that's your home, regardless of whether he's paying the rent or not, or you think finances are going to be an issue, there is a benefit system, whether you like it or not. It's there for emergencies. And if the relationship's broken, don't try to hold on to it just because financially you're going to struggle. That's the wrong reason to try and stay in there, because you will get drawn back in emotionally. You know, he'll make you a cup of tea, or he'll do something nice and you think, oh, I remember the good days. And you get lulled into it. You sign a new tenancy, and as soon as that new tenancy's signed, you're back where you were November, you know. So as much as you think you don't have options, the option of changing your lock and putting your ex outside is an option. And don't think you're being cold-hearted or selfish. You're safeguarding yourself.
I came across something, you know, around how to manage breakups and kind of re-establish and redefine a relationship with an ex. And I think that certainly for me, I'm thinking about my children's father. Jackie, I wasn't assertive enough at that particular time to wasn't so much a housing issue, but I wasn't boundaried enough. And I felt that I kind of carried a degree of guilt that because these children, our children were our children, it just kind of muddied the waters in terms of boundaries. And I think I also had this kind of, June mentioned shame, a sense of shame of being single. You know, I kind of felt a lot of pressure to be in a relationship and to stay with the children's father. And, you know, various people saying, well, you've made your bed, you've got to lie in it. And so, you know, I now feel how important counselling is, either, you know, when you're thinking about the breakup or you're anticipating a breakup and after the breakup, in terms of really beginning to connect to self and understand exactly what it is you need to take care of self, whilst at the same time kind of thinking of the children's needs as well. Somebody who's really impartial, who's going to help you through it and avoid all those kind of mind games that sometimes happen with like exes that can be quite manipulative. And I think even mediation sometimes, if you've got children and things are difficult, to kind of help, you know, two exes to kind of have a different partnership that doesn't involve sex and doesn't involve it having to be a relationship that once was. Yeah.
You know, what you talk about there, Judy, is really important about the counselling aspect of things, because sometimes you may feel so upset with yourself and the shame, what you mentioned, June, that you don't know why the relationship failed. What you might feel like a failure yourself, and you may feel that you're letting your children down. And so it's really important to, get the count. You don't have to, but but what is important is that you do start to self-reflect and look at what went wrong, why, what was my part in it, because we all have a part in a relationship, and your part could be you put up with a lot of stuff, you saw the red flags and you didn't listen, so that's your part. So look at that. Why did I not follow the red flags, and what do I need to do now in order to move on into a new relationship when I'm ready? So it's really important to look at, how do you present yourself into a relationship? What do you bring? What baggage might you be bringing? And learning from those mistakes that you've made in that previous relationship. I always say, when I leave a relationship, what did I learn? And what do I now know that I don't want? And those are really important self-reflective questions to ask yourself.
Sometimes I think the pain of breaking up with someone, when you see the thing about X, that people are so quick to always blame the other person. And, that person may well have been shitty, whatever. But like you said, Yvonne, I think the gold is really in, what was my part? Was there something, and that's not to victim blame, but it's like, where there's some behavior that even if it is just that I put up with stuff that I shouldn't have put up with. Owning that bit means that you're going to make a different decision, because people sometimes can be in these cyclical patterns of basically being in the same relationship, just with somebody with a different face. Somebody with a different penis, somebody with a different face, but it's the same pattern.
Same relationship. Yeah.
I
totally get that. I'm going to offer an alternative viewpoint, however. So first and foremost, I really agree with what Yvonne was saying as well about, making sure that you get the learning, but just to kind of turn it on its head slightly in terms of not so much thinking about what it is you don't want, but what is it you do want? Remember, language is really important. And we get what we focus on. So if we're focusing on what we don't want, chances are we end up in relationships with the same people, but with different faces. Okay. So when we turn that around in terms of, okay, well, what is it I really want? What's this taught me here? But also as well, not all breakups are traumatic, and not all breakups are as a result of somebody did something. When my ex-husband and I broke up, it was because we had been together at that time a really long time, something like 15, 16 years or something like that. And we just knew that we had come to the end of our road together. And when you make that decision, even though we made that decision together, it was still just as painful. It was still filled with the shame that you mentioned, Jude. It was still filled with the guilt that you mentioned, Judy, in terms of, I'm not in a relationship, I'm not married anymore. A lot of our married friends as well, we were like the first ones amongst our group to split up, and we were like, well, what's wrong with you guys? Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of shame and guilt that goes with that. But when you know that you've done it for the right reasons, at that time we were still young enough, I suppose we were still in our 40s, that were, we were able to give each other another chance at life with somebody else. And we had a child in that. And it didn't make it any easier. The breakup was not easy. Just because we made a conscious decision, it doesn't mean it was easy. We still had to go through the stuff. But what it did mean is that we were able to teach our daughter that endings don't have to be hard, they don't have to be awful, because we co-parented, and she thinks it's highly hilarious now when she sees us together, because we're, to all intents and purposes, we're quite pally, and and she just thinks it's really funny. She's like, how on earth did you two ever together in the first place? Right? It's like, well, so that's just my alternative viewpoint in terms of breakups aren't always traumatic, but just because they're not traumatic, it doesn't make them any easier to get over. It took me 10 years, even though I had another relationship. It took me nearly 10 years before I could honestly say 100% that I felt better, or I felt whole, or back together again. It's a long time.
It can take a long time for some of us, because for some of us, especially if we're sensitive and empaths, we give so much in a relationship. And so when that breaks down, it can take, as you say, a very long time to get over, to heal those wounds and to forgive, perhaps. You know, it's a long process, and we've got to go through that, especially around the forgiveness side of things. You know, my second husband, who I split up from, was it 15 years or so ago, he actually turned up during lockdown for some strange reason, and actually I was just like and I thought, what is going on? And he actually turned up in the month that we were actually married as well. And what was going on was there was still some forgiveness work that I had to do. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that I'd let go and forgiven, but I hadn't. I was still holding on to some anger around his infidelity. So sometimes it can take a long time for us to heal those wounds that we may be carrying around for years without even knowing. And one thing that I would also like to add, just following on from what Gail was saying, when we focus on what we want and yet we still don't get what we want, we then really do need to take a look at what is going on a subconscious level. What is driving your subconscious? Why you're not getting what it is you say you want? You may have this list of these wonderful qualities that you want in a man or in a woman, and you're focusing on that list. You're focusing, and this is what I want. This is what I'm gonna get. You might put it on a dating site. This is what I want. Blah blah blah, and you still end up with the same type of person. That's when you really do need to go within and look at what issues are driving you in the subconscious. And you may find that you've got abandonment issues. You may find that you've got attachment issues, intimacy issues, abuse issues. You may find so many other things that is going on inside as to why you're not getting what you want. So this is why it's so important, I feel, to really reflect when you've left a relationship and do the work, because you're just going to carry on and on and on, and you're just going to keep going round in circles. So do the work.
It's so true.
Just adding to what you were saying. Sorry, Gail.
I was just saying, so many of us don't want to do the work, but you have to. There's no shortcut. You got to do the work. I remember in Iyanla Vanzant, I thought I had it on my desk here, but I haven't. But in her Acts of Faith, remember Acts of Faith from how many years ago? She had, in one of her daily devotions, actually says, "Would you marry you? You know, would you marry you?
Okay.
Yeah, would you marry you? And if you wouldn't marry you, then why on earth would somebody else marry you if you wouldn't marry yourself?"
Just adding to what both what Yvonne and Gail just said, one of the things that I've learned about the whole dating thing, and you know, like what you were saying, Yvonne, about, you know, people do these lists and go, I want them to have this, that, and the other, and whatever. Yeah. You know, it's like, well, what are you bringing to the table? Yeah. You've got your list about what you want from him, but are you matching the things that you're asking of him? Are you those things? Exactly. When we're talking about vibration and alignment and all of that kind of stuff, you are going to call in who you are. So, and that's, again, that's not to victim blame, but like you said, Yvonne, if people got attachment issues, if they've got trauma issues, if they're not doing the work, as you said, Gail, there are no shortcuts. You're just going to call in a different face with the same issues, because the universe actually wants you to heal. So you're going to keep calling in the same people until the universe is going to keep saying to you, you need to look at this, you need to look at this, you need to look at this, you need to look at this. And it will send you different people with the same issues until you look at it. That's what I believe. Absolutely. You're going to get sent, you know, people or situations that are going to challenge you to look at that specific issue until you do it.
I think that doing the work is something that's actually ongoing. It's not just around, you know, when you kind of have a breakup. And I mean, Yvonne, what you were talking about with kind of working on the subconscious and the deeper issues of, you know, attachment, you kind of, well, I mean, mummy wounds, daddy wounds, and abandonment, you know, it's all kind of like related. And I think sometimes, even if you're not aware of what's happening on a conscious level, I think if you're kind of doing something, for example, something around kind of yoga, chakra meditation, or different kinds of meditation, or working on crystals, there's still a way in which you're working on yourself at different levels, even though you might not be fully conscious and saying to yourself, well, I'm working on attachment today. But there is definitely something about doing the work each and every day and having some form of like self-care or some form of kind of reflection, you know, on an ongoing basis, because, you know, we're constantly evolving, or we should be working on that. And very much letting go of the idea of a partner who is going to make it all better and a partner who's going to complete us, because there's nothing worse than a breakup when that kind of false dream has kind of like disappeared and dissipated, you know, because you've invested so much time on the fairy tale rather than the reality. And the reality is that kind of daily work, basically.
Yeah, I agree totally with everything you've just said there, Judy, because I was just thinking, in some situations, if you're doing the work and you accept that you're not dependent on that other person, you may have issues in your relationship that you're actually able to navigate, that you're actually able to work on and raise what's happening for you, why you're responding in a certain way. And if your partner is actually evolving as well, you know, rather than that relationship crashing and burning, it may be something where you actually grow together. You acknowledge that you both have work to do, and there's no blaming. There's just this is how I am, and you know, how do we move this forward? So I would totally agree that, you know, whether you're in a relationship or not, do that work. Do
Absolutely.
it for you.
100%.
Have that self-care, have that routine, have that focus on you. It's not selfish. If anything, it's going to help you have sustainable relationships and actually know what you need in that partner out there. You know, you're whole, so you're going to look out there and you're going to go, yeah, he doesn't look how I thought he'd look, but actually he has the same values, he cares, and he's evolving. He's not stagnant, he's not his past, he's just who we are now, you know.
Yes.
And it gives you a chance at not just romantic relationships, friendships as well.
Yeah.
You know, you've worked on yourself, you're presenting who you are to your friends, and they either accept you or you don't, or they don't, you know. So this X and moving on, I guess it's really about, it's about the relationship you have with yourself.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
You said, Jackie, oh, but it's not selfish. But it is selfish, and there's nothing wrong with selfish. You know, if there's one thing I feel quite strongly about, is changing the narrative around that word selfish. You know, being selfish, selfish is not a bad thing. You know, we do need to prioritize ourselves. We do need to make sure that our self-care is spot on, especially if we're going into the realm of relationships. Because relationships, we all, when we talk, you know, when we talk amongst ourselves about what we want from our relationship, whether we're in one or we're not in one, we always talk about, we want balance. We want someone who feeds us, who nurtures us, someone that we can feed and that we can nurture. Well, we can't do that for another person if we can't do it for ourselves. So we do have to be selfish. and they need to be selfish too, so that we can come together and we can be whole and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't want to be
because,
two drunks in a bar.
exactly.
Do that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that touches on being codependent. We don't want to be codependent in that relationship. We want to be interdependent. So you got to know that you're happy within yourself. You're not looking for someone to make you happy, because somebody can't make you happy. You make yourself happy and they will come and add to that happiness. So this is why we have to really look at this codependency, and codependency runs very deep into your core way of being. So if you are, that really means a lot of work needs to be done to get rid of that codependency. And it's not easy, because I grew up as a codependent and it's taken a long time to become an interdependent person. So yeah, keep doing the work, keep reflecting on what is it that you need in a relationship. What do you need for yourself? How do I look after myself, so that I will know that in a relationship that will continue, and then your partner can also help in that way. But what I wanted to kind of look at as well was some of the practical tips that you can also do to get over your ex. I remember one of my ex's ex-partners, he was a narcissist, and his energy was very kind of strong and very controlling, etc. Me being controlled, can you believe that? Well, there was a power struggle, but yeah, anyway, when I actually got rid of him, and I'll say it like that because when it comes to a narcissist, it is about getting rid of them. I actually, some of the practical things that I've done in my home was light a candle in every room, a little tea light white candle, and let that burn. Or sage the house, change your bed sheets, get rid of the bed sheets, get rid of that energy, you know, get rid of that energy, get rid of all their things out of your space. That's really important, actually, really, really important, because everything is energy. And
You know,
if you've got their stuff still in your space, it's taking up space, and you're not going to be able to kind of breathe or allow another person to come in that space when you're ready.
You're so right, because you know, when my marriage failed, part of my way of dealing with it with my daughter, I mean, she was fine, you know, I just made it up in my head that I had to get her through it, but you know, on reflection, she was perfectly fine. It was me who was weird. But one of the things that I did was I didn't move the pictures around the house for about 2 years. So if anyone that came in the house, it looked like we were still this happy family in the house, because I kept all the pictures up, because I didn't want her to think that, you know, okay, me and her dad are finished and I'm just stripping him out just like that. But what that did for me was I could never settle. I couldn't settle. So eventually, after a couple of years, I took the pictures down, but the house was still very much the same, because when we bought the house, he had most of the say, I would say, around how we decorated this house, because we had another house, which, you know, was kind of like my project. So this one, he was like all DIY'd out. We're just keeping this really, really simple girl. And for years, I couldn't settle. I felt stagnant. I felt stuck. And it wasn't until 2 years ago, literally, I gutted my house. Only 2 years ago. There is nothing in my house now, not one single thing that was here when he and I lived here as a family. And it's really funny, because bearing in mind that we originally bought this house together, you know, he bought me out, so it's not his house anymore. This is where we spent most of the time raising our daughter together. But when he comes here now, he feels really uncomfortable, you know, because it's not his house.
That's right.
Energy, Yvonne, the energy has completely shifted. Yeah. And I had to do that. And now, that's why I say it took me quite a long time, because it's a process. Because I didn't realize at the time that all the emotional stagnation and whatnot I was feeling was because he was literally in the bricks. He was in the he was in the furniture. You know, he was still here. I had to remove it all. Get rid of him. Sage him out.
Sage him out.
Sage him out and move them.
Yeah. Social media is also a really important one.
Oh, yes.
I know that, and people are probably going to fight me on this, but I think that either unfriending them, obviously depending on the relationship, you might need to block them. You have to really question, because that is a huge boundary issue. You know, none of this peeping, let me just see what he's doing, and because that's just going to add to how long it's going to take for you to get over this person. So not only do you have to think about whether you're going to stay friends with this person on social media, but also, do you have mutual friends? Were they his friends first that you kind of became friends with? You have to, you know, you have to make those decisions, because the last thing you want is to start seeing, you know, somebody else kind of posting something and they've tagged him on it, and then you see that picture of him with some next girl, and it's just messy.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Exactly. Exactly. So you got to think about these things, because if you're going to make a clean break, especially in the early weeks and months, when especially if you're with them a long time and you know you're trying to make a clean break, it might be that you just you know you block them or whatever, because so you can move forward, because there's going to be a grieving process. That's really important, whether it's a good relationship or not. There will be a grieving process. So you will feel sad, you might feel angry, you might feel resentful, you might feel shame, you might feel, you know, but it's important to give yourself permission to have that space to feel and journal, write it out, do it in therapy, whatever it is. That's a healthy part of any sort of ending of the relationship. If you can do it in therapy, even better. You know,
and you know what, that grieving process, it's going to take as long as it takes. It just depends on who you are and how intense you are as a person. And I would always recommend not jumping into another relationship, which is what a lot of people do. They within 2 weeks, a month or whatever, they're in another relationship. It's so not healthy, because where is your time for grieving? Where is your time for healing? Where's your time for learning and growing from that relationship? You're just going to bring all your baggage into another relationship. So give yourself that time and space. It's so vital to do that. So vital.
I agree. That growth piece is the bit that people forget, how necessary it is to grow from the experience, because, and we see it as well, you know, we've all got that one friend that just keeps on the perpetual cycle, and you just think, sweetheart, if only you just give yourself the space to grow, you know, you'll be able to break this cycle. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It takes as long as it takes. You know, there were some friends of mine who were saying, oh my God, what you still upset about that girl? Oh, you're not going on about that again, are you? It's been years, or oh, but you're with somebody else now, thankfully. And this is what's really important as well about when you do eventually go into another relationship, is that it's important that person also understands. It's slightly different, I suppose, if it's a divorce, but it is important that person understands. Because my new partner, he said to me, he had been through it himself as a divorced man, and he said to me, there's going to come certain points in this whole journey of you guys no longer being together where you're going to feel, even though you're not together, you've gone your separate ways, but the fact that you're still in each other's lives because you co-parent and you are actually quite panicked, there are certain points that are going to come where you're really going to feel it. And I was like, no, why? Me and you, we're good. What are you talking about? And then he met someone else. I'm there happy, wrap up, right? But he met someone else. And it wasn't the fact that he'd met someone else, because this wasn't the first person that he'd met since we'd separated. But it was the first person that I knew he was going to be starting a whole new life with. And it was just getting my head around that. But so, you know, we had to have the talk. So you're right, there are different stages. You know, it takes as long as it takes. It doesn't take anything away from the fact if you're in another relationship or anything. It's just knowing that you've got to deal with it, as Yvonne said before. You got to, and Judy, you just got to do the counselling, you got to do the work, because it will just show up later on down the road.
It's really hard during lockdown, though. I feel, you know, for people who had those breakups, and then, you know, you're kind of like, you're in your yard, or you've got your bubble, you know, your one bubble, and I think especially at Christmas time, for people that have gone through their first Christmases without their partner, you know, without their children, I feel so much for them. And I think there's something about grieving kindly, in terms of, you know, being able to grieve, but going out for a walk somewhere in nature, you know, being able to grieve and listen to Mary J. Blige and just allow yourself to weep, you know. And I think there is definitely an argument for like self-soothing, you know, the simple stuff of just wrapping yourself up in a blanket, you know, hot chocolate, chocolate, you know, but not too much all the time. But something that is comforting to you and soothing, a cuddly toy, you know, stroking your pet cat, you know, something that is kind and soothing. Yeah.
That's so beautiful, because it is about really showing yourself compassion, so that you don't then go into that space of maybe looking for other people, getting into another relationship too quickly, or drinking too much, or you know, falling back maybe into bad habits if you did have bad habits. It's really, yes, self-soothe, show yourself compassion, give yourself some time. It's okay to be sad, it's okay to cry. Pick up the phone to your friends and those who are supportive, really get that support, and don't go on into destructive behaviors because you've broken up, because that's just not going to get you anywhere. It's, you know, we're moving into this new paradigm now where it's so important to really be in our heart space more, and allow ourselves that love, that self-love. As we mentioned earlier, it's not selfish to show yourself love and to put yourself first. It's the most loving thing that you can do for yourself. So this self-love thing is vital, it's necessary, and that's what's going to get us through these breakups.
I just want to add to that as well. It's like there's this thing around, you know, Black women sometimes can be so hard on themselves because we've been trained, you know, racism erodes our self-esteem as well anyway. And so, you know, if we don't have really good self-esteem, we may end up in relationships that don't honor us, you know, and then it's hard for us to leave the relationship because we're so, you know, we've got dysfunctional attachments to people, so we end up staying in them longer than we should do, and then when we leave we blame ourselves, you know. So I think this is why, you know, we've echoed the conversation around doing the work throughout this whole session. This is even more reason why it's important to do the work and to, you know, to see a therapist or whatever and get the support, because we don't, you know, as Black people, as Black women, we don't have a good relationship because of racism with our feelings, with our own humanity. So, you know, if you're doing the work with a therapist, if you're doing the work with somebody, a mentor or whatever, that's going to help you honor that and to help you grieve the process, you're going to be less likely to choose somebody in the next relationship that's going to mirror the same issues, because you can't, you know, going out of one relationship and falling into bed with somebody else is not going to solve the problem. You have to do the work, and it really does come down to self-awareness, because when you become more self-aware, you can see the patterns that are you're not going to ignore the red flags, because you know, they're right in your face, you can't ignore them. And if you've got a support network, if you do have a therapist, they can hold you through that grieving process. They can help you to see the blind spots, the things that maybe you don't want to see. They can help you understand that behavior was stemmed from an absent father or an abusive mom or whatever it is, or because of racism or whatever. it can help you understand the things that might be painful for you to look at, you know, and you're not trying to avoid your feelings by diving into another relationship, you know, because that's a lot of time what it is. They go into another relationship because they don't want to feel what happened in the last one. They don't want to feel it, you know. So it is really about understanding your relationship to relationships.
Yeah,
that's the goal. The goal is understanding and honoring your relationship to relationships.
that's right.
I love that.
You know,
Yeah,
makes such a difference.
yeah.
Makes such a difference. Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things as well, isn't it, that sometimes the counselling is great and we need that, but not everyone. It's also about who are we surrounding ourselves with, who are we taking counsel from? Because I know that there were some people that were really pleased when my marriage failed, almost a little bit too pleased. They're like, you know, what's going on there? You know, that's not right. But you want people around you. You know, Yvonne was saying not so long ago, what are the practical things you can do to get yourself through? And you want to be around, you want to gravitate towards those people who really do have your best interests at heart. And there may not be a lot of people. You may find that there's only one or two people in your circle who really fulfill that as well. But whether it's one, whether it's five, you know, just make sure that you allow yourself to be vulnerable with that person or with those people. And because they will be able to pick you up, they will be able to even lead you and help you, hold your hand as you're going through the grief of it, but without judgment. Because if they've really got your heart and they've really got your back, they will do that for you without judgment.
Yeah.
That's really important. Make sure that you know who you're surrounded with, because it's not everybody who says the words "I'm for you" that are actually for you, as we know.
Absolutely. And the one thing to look out for is, in terms of your circles, are they happy for me when things go good? And are they there for me when things are bad? And if they can be there for those two occasions, then that's a good friend. Because there are some friends who are only around when things are not going well, and because they like to see you down, you know, and they want to feel that they're important. They like your drama. They want to see that, they want to feel that they're there for you, you know. But when you're doing well, they're not so happy and they're not really there for you. That's not a true friend. So be mindful that the people around you are there for you in the good times and the bad times.
I say all the time, if you can't see me cry, then you don't deserve to see my smile. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Gail, you were saying something about without judgment, and it made me think about, you know, some of the sisters out there who belong to a church or a mosque, where actually breakups can invite a lot of judgment. Yeah. And you know, it again, I think, you know, if people are actually true to their faith, they are not going to be judgmental on somebody that's going through a breakup. They may guide them according to whatever their spiritual beliefs are and invite kind of exploration of that. But, you know, somebody who's really true to their faith and who's really there for you will be there for you without judgment and with acceptance. And I think that's something that's really important for people who have a faith or a religion to embrace. They're not there to beat you up. You know, there's no rationality for it, not even from, you know, a religious perspective. But I recognize it's quite challenging, I think, for somebody who might be in a church to kind of like go through a breakup. Hurdles to cross.
That's a very good point.
It's awful because at that time I was very active in my local church, and I actually stopped going as a result. And
Yeah.
nobody was openly judgmental, but it was the family. This is the family's tea, because you know churches have all loads of these different socials, don't they? And it was, you know, the family tea, or dads and daughters, and you know, it was just things that I suddenly felt excluded from. Yeah, and that took a lot of time to work through. So you're right, Judy, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because what do people do? You don't want to do what I did, which was I just ran. I just walked out and just never went back. But I know there have been times when I would have really appreciated that fellowship.
Yeah.
I suppose it's about having honest conversations within your fellowship.
Yeah.
Of women will just change churches, because like you're saying, some of it is about your response to what's going on. You feel awkward, you no longer feel as acceptable in the social groups. You know, a lot of women that I've worked with in the past, they will not leave their religion, but they'll go to another church where they can give their side of what's really gone on, and they can get some sort of support still in those same groups, but not where they were attending before. So I think you're right. Lots of people within the religious faith will try to move around because those people know them. They'll go to a next Gurdwara or a next church, you know, to find a different group who maybe, yeah, will put their arms, open their arms to start with. Yeah.
There is still very much a stigma, isn't there? It's great that you brought that up, Judy, because there is still such a stigma for people that do, you know, that do practice, you know, religious faith or whatever, and they're separating for whatever reason. I mean, I've even seen situations where there's been domestic violence going on, and they're still kind of like, well, you know, you're still not allowed to leave, you know, because even though it's the relationship is domestic violence, because, like, you know, you're married, you know, this is your bed, you have to lie in it, sort of thing. You know, and in one particular woman, she did end up getting divorced, but it was a huge hoo-ha because she wanted to get divorced, even though the relationship was violent. And actually, the woman always end up still getting the blame.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's still always the woman.
It's so I think it's disgusting, actually, because I know of I know of one woman who left her husband because he was beating her up, but the church that she's in, Jehovah's Witness, which is the one that I came from, she's not allowed to divorce him because it's not on the grounds of adultery. So I don't know how many years down the line, maybe 20 years down the line now, she can't remarry because she's not allowed to. And then there's another person that I know who's been in this marriage, and she won't leave it because, and he's been violent towards her, but she won't leave the marriage because she hasn't done any, she's got no self-worth whatsoever, but she's been putting up with abusiveness, and it's awful. And when I look back on my first marriage, something happened in that marriage whereby my heart broke, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to leave, and I was told you can't leave, and you can't get divorced, and you got to. And I was still quite naive because I was a young bride. I was 21 when I got married.
Young bride.
Does that sound like? I was 21 when I got married for the first time, and I was fresh, and and I listened to what they said. I listened to what the elders said, and I didn't leave him at that point. And I stayed on in the marriage for another, I don't know, maybe 3 years or so. And in the end, it still ended up that we split up. But I could have left sooner. So the pressures and the judgments that some churches and religions do place on these women, it's based in patriarchy, and it's got to stop. You've got to stop.
Toxic.
Yeah. Toxic patriarchy and masculinity, and you know, you can't leave, and this, and the shame that you're going to bring on the family. No, your well-being is much more important. So you know, this is why a lot of women really do need to go on that healing journey to really get themselves to a space of empowerment.
Mm.
And actually, if you have a
Mm.
support network, to attach to, it's easier to detach from the toxicity,
Yeah.
because then you don't feel
Absolutely.
like you're going mad, and it's not so isolating, you know. And that's what actually helped me leave, you know, the last really toxic relationship that I was in. That's what helped me leave. I went into recovery for addictive relationships, and you know, those are people that follow me know that I've been quite open about this. Yeah, I actually was able to form healthy attachments to a support network, to my therapist, to recovery meetings, and you know, I had a series of friends. I had a friendship circle of people that were in recovery that helped me unpick and understand what was going on. So I was actually, it was easier for me to set firm boundaries and leave that relationship, because I had something healthy to attach to. So think about that. If you really want to leave, you know, it's important to have some form of support to attach to, because then it's just going to make it easy, and you won't find yourself going back. If you're isolated, it's going to be easy. You know, it's easy for you to get talked into it and to go back to that person. And if you've got a support network, you're just more grounded in how you're feeling about things, and you won't go back. It's harder to go back when you've got a firm group of people that really, really do care about your well-being, and that you don't, you know, you're not going to get gaslit by the person to go back. Yeah, really important.
Very. Right, we've got 4 minutes, ladies. Any final words?
Oh, I just want to put in there self-care. Whatever situation you're in now, ladies, start to explore your self-care. Start to look at the different ways of self-caring. Start to buy yourself that little perfume, or start to use your sage. Start to be selfish. Start to really embrace you, build that relationship with you. You know, connect with us on our platforms and see what we're talking about, see what we're doing. Because one thing that we do promote as goddesses is that self-care. It's about ultimate self-care, you know, and it will be different for each of us, but start somewhere. Just after you've watched this show, you know, start with one thing that is just for you. Go and set that bath. And if you normally spend 10 minutes in there, spend 20. Start to do things that are just specifically for you.
Love that.
Anyone else? Yes, Jackie, thank you.
That's just such a beautiful note which to end on, Jackie. There's nothing further need be added.
I can offer a free gift, actually, just in addition to what Jackie was saying about self-care and how we all, you know, as goddesses are around that. I have a free PDF at the moment. It's 101 simple self-love tools. 101 simple self-love tools. So if you go to my website, or go to heal.juneallen.net, okay, heal.juneallen.net. It's absolutely free. You can download it there, and there's loads and loads and I've actually updated it recently, so it's COVID friendly. It's not telling you to go out traveling or whatever. Obviously, it's stuff that you can do in your house. So yeah, just you can download.
Right. Send us all a copy.
I'll put it in the group so you can have it, so you can get a copy of it. But yeah, so 101 simple self-love tools.
Great, brilliant. Thank you.
I would say that it's never too late to learn. If you're surrounded by lots of people who are in difficult relationships and toxic relationships, you know, like get a book that speaks to you about relational intelligence is you know, a book, Darius Daniels, just really kind of get to kind of learn again, if there's nobody around you that is in a position to kind of help you.
Brilliant, thank you. And you know what I'd like to add? Because there are some men who follow us and who listen to our discussions, and this could be applying to them as well, because they may have been in a toxic relationship. They may have experienced domestic violence. You know, they may have had a narcissistic wife. So, so the same applies to you. The same applies to do what's right for you and look after yourself. So, yeah, on that note, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope you found our discussion of benefit. Please join us again in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be having another wonderful discussion. And this year, look out for more resources, because Goddesses of the Round Table, we're moving up, and we're going to be offering so much more in 2021. So just stay posted, stay connected. Love, light, and blessings to you all. Bye-bye.